Hi, everybody. This is Mason. I'm a restaurant consultant, and today's episode is going to be a little bit more podcast style. I actually had a big travel day pretty recently, and I'm now recording in a new location. And of course, my camera setup is actually broken from my flight, so we're going to be making some arrangements, but definitely, kind of moving forward, getting a little long format video out. So the first thing that I wanted to do was actually run a small poll and kind of offer some options and what have you. And I don't mind as a small channel, very low participation. But so I figured the first thing we would do is a little bit about me. If you've ever seen one of my first couple of videos, I did a little intro segment where I talked about, for one, I apologize for any ads on these videos. Once I qualify for the YouTube Partners Program, I'm going to be demonetizing all the videos. I'm never going to take ad revenue, nor am I going to take sponsors. I'll only ever be working with pure partnerships or, having people on. I have like a dream guest list, of course, that, dream blunt rotation to have onto this show one day. Show in air quotes, obviously. I'm not planning on making a career out of YouTube. This is just kind of a community outreach and, I don't know, I guess you can say a form of marketing, right? So yeah, to kind of get back directly to who I am, the real answer to that is kind of a nobody. I'm a small to medium business consultant. I'm not famous. I'm not going to make any grandiose claims. I'm relatively humble, at least some of the time. Yeah, I work with small to medium restaurants. I work with bringing enterprise solutions and multidisciplinary solutions to kind of mom and pop and smaller stores. I've worked all over the US. I've worked actually kind of doing consulting for people strategically and financially in a couple of different countries now. So, it's nice. I mean, I feel like there's always this kind of constant measuring, if we're going to use it appropriately, kind of the PG version in the restaurant industry, is anytime you say something like, oh, I've been in the business for 14 years, somebody else immediately goes, oh, well, I've been in it for 25. I've been, walking around restaurants since I was 5 years old, and my mom and dad's, and that's great. I never discount that. I just always kind of think it's a little frustrating that people's first reaction is to try to like make it a competition. I'm talking about what my background is and my experience. The amount of time I've been in. Obviously I've seen a lot of things, and everyone sees different things. That's the whole point of it, is collaboration of experience. So yeah, yeah. Out of the things I've seen, I've been captaining a 500 seat restaurant in Chicago's River North district. I was actually, I think, the youngest GM until pretty recently in my old restaurant group. Sorry, there's a handful of some robins having a wonderful territory fight outside. I helped open, train, and stabilize franchises across somewhere around 10 or 8 states or something. I can't remember if it's like 12 stores, 8 states, or something. I pivoted into food and beverage management, all kinds of electronic and financial services. The kids call it fractional services these days, but for me, it was just consulting to overhaul beverage programs, do financials, all that stuff for restaurants, all the way down to in the Chicago market, a couple $100,000, five or $600,000, all the way up to what, 5 million, I think, was one of my biggest. So individual stores. So yeah, that's just a little. Anytime you ever click on or hear or see something from me and you think, well, who is this clown? Well, that's a little bit of background of the clown college I went to. So to get into today, oh, and I'm gonna throw some visuals onto the screen. Uh, I don't like the idea of everyone just staring at a black screen, so these are just different photos that I've taken over the years from different places. I actually do a lot of travel back and forth between Chicago and Peru, if you follow me on any of my social media. So you'll see some, shots that are all mine from different places I've been and dumb shit I've done. But yeah, so today I actually have a bunch of tabs I've collected over a long period of time, actually, on my phone. But some of them a little bit more recently, a little bit more pertinent to current ongoing things in the restaurant industry, both in Chicago and across the U.S. And I'd like to roll into a handful of those. I will be putting links for most of these into the description. Normally, I don't like to put links that have paywalls on them, even soft paywalls where you just have to create an account. I like to let people know. So I will just give you, in some of these instances, the full article headline and the author. So that way you can track it down yourself and see if you want to make an account or whatever that'll be. Anything else that's not paywalled will be directly linked for easy access. So the first one that caught my mind actually is, I think, the most recent. It's kind of, I don't know, just strikes me interesting and fun. It's from the Straits Times. I don't very much see a lot from Straits Times. I get a lot of recommended articles along the restaurant and business trend due to my browsing history. It's Mocktails No More, Why Bars Are Taking Non-Alcoholic Drinks Seriously by Sherry Lok. L-O-K, Cherry Lock. Sherry Lock. But this is a really, kind of comprehensive and great article. The photos are amazing. They're taking photos of, this guy named Kelvin who's working out of Singapore, and Atlas Bar, and what's this other one? Mo Bar. And it looks like Singapore and Korea and all these places. And immediately they're talking about, I think, some things that should sound familiar if you've listened to me rant and rave at all about, for one, they say, don't call them mocktails. And I'm not going to get into quoting the articles extensively. I'm not going to rip off Sherry's work. Go read it for yourself, right? But they talk about not calling them mocktails anymore. They talk about calling them zero proof cocktails, which, I'm a little on the fence about. I very much, love kind of George Carlin's thing about okay, what's the difference between zero proof cocktail and mocktail? I think you can take things seriously without taking them too seriously. There's a lot of language dressing for something. You're just ordering a drink. It's going to be okay, guys. This really goes into the philosophies behind these zero proof drinks and the way that they're being created. And I think one of the great things that really stuck out to me is they said, they're like, hey, we're making new flavor experiences here because, all these people are looking for ritual and community, and some of them are choosing not to drink, and or some of them are choosing to drink less, and we're going to offer them these delicious things to fill that void, and that aren't just all sugar based. And as you may or may not have seen, right, I have a beverage framework in place for S&B restaurants who don't have beverage programs or full-time F&B directors or mixologists on staff to get quick starting points to, kind of adjust their non-alcoholic beverage program to fill the void with what's going on, right? I mean, I've talked about this again previously, right? IWSR, International Wine and Spirits, those guys have the reports out there that consumers are not ordering another round. They're not ordering multiple rounds of these mocktails. I actually don't really remember if that comes up at all in the Straits Times article. But, addressing that is very integral, I think, for restaurant businesses navigating this era. And so, I just really think it's a very worthwhile article to check out. I think that these are obviously all very high end. This guy's putting the one photo that they have is great. It's a beautiful, beautiful location, but the guy's using a pair of tweezers to put what I assume is a culinary flower. I'm sure maybe it's edible onto this, beautiful glass and everything. And that's great. I still think that, non-alcoholic beverage programs can be scaled at every price point and level for every kind of dining experience, because obviously, in my target category, small to medium, you're not going to be able to charge $18. And I don't think you should be charging $18 for something that doesn't get people drunk. I think that I've talked about the limits of that before. I think your consumers are very conscious of that limit. Um, to pivot off of that topic momentarily, too, being in Chicago and in Illinois, uh, marijuana is legal recreationally in this state. And the really interesting thing about that too is we have this thriving, at least until recently, right? I don't. This gets a little weird, right? They passed, as far as I saw, this federal ban on hemp products for these THC derivative, like hemp production, which is how you may or may not in your market see things like Delta 8 or THC or CBD drinks. CBD, cannabinol, cousin of the non psychoactive cousin of marijuana, as it's widely understood, like THC. And I think, right, like Delta 8 is obviously this really weird thing targeting the very specific language of the marijuana legislation, is that like normal THC that you like get from a joint or like whatever is like Delta 9 or something. And then like Delta 8 is just this weird thing that's like, I don't know, one carbon atom or something off on the left, which has most of the same effects but different strengths and slightly different like profile. Anyway, uh, I've gotten a couple of questions from clients and even some criticism from peers because I have some friends that really lean into the CBD market, and they're like, yeah man, it's California sober now, it's not like everyone's like going straight, right? And yeah, I think that those are fine. Yeah, I think that there's plenty of people offering them. I think, Christ, I mean, I think I can just say this, right? Mars Community Brewing, they make amazing CBD drinks. I've sold and drank them for years myself. Mars does some great beer as well, right? I have a wonderful tap room down over in Pilsen, some great food down there. It's been a long time since I've been there, but um, I think they offer their CBD drinks in house, and I'm not going to comment or question what that looks like specifically for them. Uh, as an operator and business consultant, one of my first things would be like, okay, well, you know, what are your insurance liabilities on offering something like that? Do you have to worry about over serving somebody CBD? Are they driving? Like, is that covered? Um, and not to be an alarmist, right? I don't think that anyone's going to pound five CBD seltzers and then crash their car on the way to, home or something. But God knows what would happen, or if that's even precedented anywhere in the courts, and what your exposure looks like. Um, so I kind of avoid those also too because they're so niche, right? I mean, we saw like I said, right? The federal changes to the hemp derivative stuff is already out there. Huge problem for everybody because long story short, when the feds ban it, right, it's like you can't move it over state lines anymore because Congress can regulate interstate commerce. And so now, if you have all these hemp fields in like Missouri, they can't drive hemp to Chicago anymore for you to process, which means, your SOL and JWF, right? So huge implications on the federal level. Like this ban, I think, starts taking place like next year fully or whatever, if it doesn't get repealed or ignored or God knows what. But that's also another reason is like with marijuana and marijuana derivatives and cousins, the legislation from state to state is so crazy and so specific that I just don't want to get involved in it. I'd like to know if anybody who sells them, I mean, outside of the supply chain instability you're probably looking at in the future, um, has had some great success with those. That would be my question too, is like, are people ordering another one, right? Because if you hand somebody, say, something like a 20 milligram dose of CBD in a soda and, mix it or whatever, or you have a cocktail that you mix a soda with that has 10 milligrams, um, how often are people going like, okay, yeah, I'll have another one. Like, yeah, I want to make sure I really feel this or something, or I know how much CBD, I can tolerate. Um, it's a really weird and interesting dosing question as far as people who are in the know, and then obviously like people who don't know. I feel like it's a pretty big barrier to entry, right? Where like, Bob and Marge, uh, Bob and Marge from Cincinnati, Ohio, might not be down. Like, oh, 10 milligrams sounds like a lot. Like, can you just put a lot of ice in it and we'll split one? You know, so there's some sounds that it seems like I'm gonna have to edit out in post. Yeah. So bouncing on from Sherry's great work there, actually, I have another one which, you know, I have another one which sounds like I'm banging on this same drum over and over again. This is from NPR, and Yuki Noguchi has a fantastic correspondent for NPR. This came out March 23rd, and this one is titled, What Does a GLP Friendly Diet Look Like? We asked nutritionists. Now, obviously, I had my long format video on GLP usage and rates, and there's a lot of chatter, a lot of scuttlebutt in the restaurant, I think, owner and chef circle about GLPs affecting numbers. Um, I'm going to summarize the TLDR. I think people are paying way too much attention to it. I think that there are other factors. I think that it highlights and supports trends that are pretty widespread and growing across consumers and the industry. I don't think GLPs, unless you're in a handful of markets, are actually directly affecting your bottom line. Once again, it's my opinion. But they talk about this thing that's going on now, right, where you can like go into some of these frozen food aisles in grocery stores, and you see this like GLP-1 friendly, uh, you know, frozen dinner thing, and the nutritionists that they're talking with, I believe Yuki Noguchi is performing like part of this dialogue, and it's in this question response. You can also listen to the article in just a few minutes. Uh, it's crazy that this doesn't sound to me, this GLP-1 friendly sticker that's going on things doesn't sound like it's regulated, doesn't sound like it's controlled, and that might sound great for some people, but for me it's a problem because like they're just advertising, like, oh, funnily enough, oh, we called in a consultant and we're gonna label this as GLP friendly. What does that mean? The article talks about this. Once again, highly recommend you go check it out. It's great journalism. Wherein it's like, what are the ingredients? What does it mean? Like, we had this conversation. We're going to continue having this conversation about like, okay, well, it's smaller portion sizes, so things need to be more nutrient dense. But the key thing is that even with my statements, right, the percentage use and proliferation of GLPs is really low in comparison to the general population in the US. And so what we're seeing with this is the genuine like health signaling, right? That's what this is, and this is where I have my problem. Is this is health signaling. GLP meals, like we said, have to be, technically speaking, more nutrient dense because people have less appetite. They're not driven to eat as much. And I don't know what effects it has. I've heard symptoms and side effects of like stomach discomfort and things like that. I mean, I don't know that it slows down digestion or something, but I'm sure regulating insulin responses and all this stuff has effects on that. So what we're seeing here though is saying that like, okay, 3% or whatever of the U.S. population is on GLP inhibitors, and mostly for medical reasons. And now they're putting this tag on these items in the freezer section saying like, hey, this is a healthy item for people using peptides and for probably people even not using peptides. Like, look, it's a smaller portion, it's fewer calories. If you're watching your waist without being on GLP, this is going to help you. And once again, it's just not regulated. They can just put that on any crock of horse shit they want because there's no repercussions. It doesn't actually mean anything. It's a marketing term. Like, this is just a small piece of advice. And obviously, like, I'm not a nutritionist, or anything. Like, I just work in restaurants, right? But never trust like a large corporation being like, oh, here's this recommendation for you, like we're friends. Like, no, I'm not a doctor either, and we didn't have a doctor actually certify this, and no, the certification doesn't mean anything, but it's healthy for you, it's good, yeah, like whether you're on the meds or not, it's gonna be good for you. Crazy, just crazy to me. I think the proliferation of like this GLP anxiety into all of these different portions of the food industry is concerning. Like I said, I think it overrides. I think it's an overtone to a lot of consumer trends, and yeah, like I think that's my biggest worry, right? Like we'll even go into this too, right? So, AP, AP Restaurants. It's by Deanne Durbin. I'm just navigating everything here on my phone real quick. Has a great article, and it's called "Smaller Portions Are a Big Restaurant Trend as Customers Watch Their Budgets and Waistlines." If I remember correctly, uh, this article actually talks about a restaurant that put together a GLP friendly menu section. Yeah, here we go. So, uh, Gutine, the owner of Cuba Libre restaurant and Rum Bar in Philadelphia, Washington, Atlantic City, New Jersey, and Orlando, um, reached out to Angel Roque or Angel Roque. I'm not familiar on that one. They developed their like quote GLP Wonderful menu, and similar thing, right? I don't want to read a bunch of stuff from here, um, but there is one particular thing in here that I do want to point out is that they developed, and good for them, right? This is an excellent sign of customer service. They made modifications to menu items. They changed like portions and all this other stuff, right? I think that is fantastic. I think that that's a super easy thing that any restaurant of any size can do. But these guys really put in a lot of work to develop this like GLP-1 wonder menu, right? And Gutine says like, he's estimated that 10 to 20 groups at each location every week have at least one person who requests the GLP Wonder menu. Now, I want to rewind that for a second. 10 to 20 at each location, which the man has a lot of locations, which once again, great. Is very successful. Listening to people and providing this level of hospitality is no doubt one of the reasons why they have this many locations, right? But this is a very big sample size over a lot of different places. And he says 10 to 20 groups at each location have at least one person who requests their GLP Wonder menu. Yeah, that that is great. It is effective. It is helping. It is a great service of hospitality. I would say that, let's call it what? 1 out of 10, 1 out of 12 people a week is right around the similar numbers that we talked about in my video. That's not an overwhelming number of people, right? Those people in general, right, just to prove, are not crushing your restaurant right now. Their overall like revenue contribution is relatively low. I'm not saying it's appropriate to ignore them. I'm not saying, right, like I laud this effort 100%. I think it's great. I think other customers can order from this menu. He already knows it's profitable. He's done all the work, and everyone can be happy with the quality of food and work and care and diligence that's been put into this menu and this product. But yeah, everyone else who's like rattling the saber around talking about how, the GLP is is the final blow to their restaurant is just like nuts to me. To see somebody who put in the work to build this whole thing is seeing returns out of it, very, very well deserved. But that the returns I would probably imagine are a little bit smaller than they were thinking, right? I mean, yeah, I'm just gonna let that one hang for a minute, right? Because 10 to 20 groups per location, one person out of those groups. I mean, and I've never been to any of these places. I would love to go check one out. There's this great like Cuban place near me I love the damn sandwiches and all, all this stuff is great. So if I ever have the chance to check out Cuba Libre or any of the sister restaurants when I'm in one of those markets, traveling or something, I definitely will, right? I mean, I'm very curious. Also, one of my favorite things to do is to go surf menus all day because, I'm a psycho like that. And so, I think that's something that is going to be on my list is to go check to see if the actual GLP Wonder menu is online and go take a peek at it and what the prices are and what the price differences are. And I think that highlights a really interesting thing too, where like the article itself has this other aspect, and I think it's a little underplayed in comparison to the GLP portion. That smaller that smaller portions are a hit right now because you know wherein you have this kind of idea where bigger is better and they can take home leftovers and all this other stuff. Guests are still looking at this as like a full kind of like capital expenditure or something, right? Like, I can go to a restaurant and I can pay $25 for spaghetti and meatballs and I can have leftovers, but I don't want to spend $25, right? And that that's before tip and taxes and all this other stuff, and whole another conversation there. But they're like, can I just pay like $10 for less spaghetti, but still enough to fill me up? Like I still want value, but I just don't want to spend $25. And I once again, I think that's huge. I think that's another driving component to this. I think that we've kind of plateaued in terms of the value offering. I think even with the kind of the wheel turning around on alcohol consumption, it's kind of like we're seeing this curtailing of decadence in this way. Decadence and volume, right? Because there's these like new studies on consumer habits and trends coming out where they're talking about like premiumization, ultra premiumization, commoditization, where like Gen Z going out, and I'm throwing that term. I feel like as the previous uh, age group that got thrown under the bus for the problems of the world, right? Like uh, talking about Gen Z, I always like want to extend this olive branch to say like, okay, the torch has been passed. You guys cause all the problems now, but that their behavior patterns right now are different to millennials when we were turning 21 and going out and drinking and crushing tons of booze, and they're drinking more refined one high end something or another, right? Like they are looking for personal experiences, outings, genuine social interaction, and that they're not crushing volume. They're okay to spend their hard-earned money on one or two things, but they're not going to sit there and keep like pissing money away on Miller High Life, right? I think this is pretty well supported. The smaller portions, the money consciousness, the kind of like individual spend, the curtailing of the volume excess. Like they're still willing to spend the money, but they're much more selective about how they spend the money. And I mean, good for them. There's no problem with that. I think people, especially if you're paying something like $30 plus for a cocktail or whatever, like maybe just maybe the prices continue to creep up without much consideration or discrimination, and now that this lens of uh, essentially, I mean, let's call it that. Let's call it this lens of discrimination is being put onto these products and saying like, well, I get that you have bills to pay, but so do I. So I'm not paying that for a drink, right? So between inflation, between other economic problems, and everything else going on, like we've seen the general premiumization of menu items across the board, across all sizes of scope and scale of restaurant. And I guess essentially what's going on now is there's like real consideration of, okay, well, you're charging a premium price, you're creating this atmosphere, but is it really worth it? Is it what I want, right? Is that question. uh, yeah, but to double back down on the to double back down on the portion and pricing thing. Yasmin Tayag has the another one. This is from the Atlantic. American snacking habits are transforming the restaurant industry. The little blurb here is chains are rolling out smaller and cheaper options for customers who just want, quote, a little treat. This is all the way back from March 3rd. And this is paywalled, but and it's actually funny. I only got about halfway through this actually before like my browser session expired and this and that and whatever. I was on the run, but I do love this emphasis and analysis on like I said, consumer habits are changing. People are maybe eating more frequently. Maybe they want smaller bites. Maybe it is just a little splurge. These things fall into these price points that there's social and personal pressure and social and personal like decision making going into these things based on people's perception of health, people's perception of value, and it's a lot easier to win these little fights than it is to win the large expenditures, right? I mean, you might be settling into things within your identity, within your niche that are a little bit to the side, a little bit more complementary to your menu items that still drive business for you. Which is really funny actually because I wasn't going to talk about it too much, but I put out a couple of shorts and I have an article on my website about the croissant metric. This is anybody listening to this is getting the sneak peek, right? How do you really think that people like make decisions when it comes to dining out? This idea that I had when writing the article that I just kind of stuck to is like green curry arancini. Arancini. I love these things, right? So arancini is like Italian for little egg or something like that. I think chini is a diminutive. And you take leftover risotto that's like cold in the pan and you roll it in flour and then you deep fry the thing and they're delicious. And there's a great place here in Chicago that does like arancini way far up on the far north side. And they're delicious. And vaguely, right, like it's kind of a pain. It's more of like this reusing like leftovers dish and everything, right? But first you got to make the risotto, which depending on your skill in the kitchen, can be varying levels of difficult, but at the very least, it can be relatively time consuming, unless you're really good at it. And then you need to actually make enough risotto for there to be leftovers, which is not a very common occurrence in my house. And then, of course, you have to like bread and deep fry the goddamn things. And I don't really know anyone that enjoys deep frying in their house very often because the smell gets everywhere. You smell like, I worked in a pizza place for years and I smelled like a mozzarella stick. All of my clothing smelled like mozzarella sticks, which, kind of helped at some bars, but it's not a great vibe to have in life all the time. So yeah, the something like a weird item, a weird fusion item, like green curry arancini. Oh, wow, that's crazy, right? Like, oh, you let the curry cool, you can do the same thing. If you have this one unique niche item as a Thai place, and even in a market like Chicago, where there are like just dozens of Thai places available in almost every neighborhood, like, do you think that everyone is measuring very technically, very picky, very like spreadsheet style? Like, oh, this place has the best, pad su and this and that, and like, comparing these notes to everything? Or do you think that they look at the menu and go like, you know what, we haven't had the arancini in a while, and that place is great, right? Like, you sell them with the one item that anchors to your store. Like, you are a Thai place. You make great Thai food. Nobody's going to question that. Nobody's arguing that. I'm not saying you're going to get away with making bad Thai food, right? But by having this deciding, unique, distinct factor, or even if people start copying it, being the first one, like that's the original, like this one is better. And who knows, maybe someone else comes along and cheats and starts grating in like Parmesan cheese or doing something, and they're like, oh, well, this one's better, right? Because they stuffed that's a thing, but being the original still gives you this leverage. And that's what I love about like the croissant metric and kind of thinking about food in these terms of thinking about food and menu design in this term of not only what's difficult for people to make, but also what's, utilizing your prime resources. When you work within a cuisine, you get this, you have these things around that other people just kind of generally don't have laying around the house, and that is the other thing. Uh, the metric is cultural, right? Could just as easily have been called like the tamale like metric, right? Because once again, just a tedious process to make these things, and I'd rather pay for tamales, right? That's just what I would rather do. But when you have these ingredients laying around, you can put them together into things that people won't normally do at home, right? Like, once again, just spitballing here, a tamale sandwich with peanut butter and sriracha or something. It just is one of those things where people are not going to be whipping this up at home normally, and you have this very unique interactive experience to offer them because you are making them, at scale. Yeah, so I have one last article from Business Insider by Catherine Lingalakis Lippert, and then I have kind of one interesting case study thing to go over, and then a little roadmap on some of my content, and then we'll call it quits on this episode. And so Catherine is over here at Business Insider talking about, and this is from, again, March 7th, 2026, your favorite restaurant is becoming a tech company. And it's really kind of funny to me in that, one of the blurbs, right? Like one of the Insta blurbs is like restaurant chains from Taco Bell and Starbucks are experimenting with AI and other tech. I mean, obviously, I've talked about like the Arches. I've talked about Big Restaurant. I've talked about the AI kind of like applications a little bit. We'll come back to that in a minute. It's just kind of interesting to me because at its core, like you have to think about McDonald's in two ways. There is the guy who very much might be your neighbor and a local business owner who like runs the brick and mortar, over on Main Street. And then there is McDonald's, the company, right? They have been a tech company for a while now. They have been a real estate company for a while now, right? Like they do things very different. They leverage themselves in ways they've gotten. Essentially, you might not believe it, especially if you're like a layman who's made it this far into this podcast, right? They are so good at making burgers that they now focus their time and revenue, like and money and everything else on other things, right? To facilitate selling more burgers. They've been huge proponents. Like the McDonald's app is like a masterwork, right? Like if I remember correctly, like ordering through the application like even qualifies you for corporate deals that are like then subsidized to the store and all this other stuff, so that way they can all kinds of stuff, right? Like so you might be wondering like why would they want to subsidize like franchises for these corporate deals for ordering through the application? Well, they have a lot of stores, and so if I'm McDonald's, I want to test cleanly in solid data environments and collect as much like clean customer information as possible, which is not viable across the entire United States of America with franchises of different levels of organization, different levels of quality independently. And then even once that information is collected at the point of sale system at the store level, it could take months to get back to you. It has all these places to get corrupted or have signal interference along the way, right? So like if I'm McDonald's and I want to study deals and I want to study consumer behaviors and all this other stuff, corporate McDonald's has so much incentive to put this out, collect data first person, pass off all the earnings and the sales and the revenue and consider it part of like the marketing budget or whatever for the franchise group. It's great and it's incredible, and they've been doing this for a long time. That's why if you have the McDonald's application, like it'll buzz your phone when you go past a McDonald's to say like, hey, 2 fries for $2.99. You're like, oh my god, that's crazy. Like a fry costs $4.99 now or whatever it costs. I don't know. I haven't eaten McDonald's in the States in like a year. I think it's like pretty well known too. Like Taco Bell Taco Bell's like CEOs have talked about weird alliteration about their consumer engagement and the way that they interact with essentially like Taco Bell super users. And that's why like the LTOs are always rotating at Taco Bell because, taking something off and then putting it back on keeps menu engagement. Uh, they really really understand like their Pareto group, right? Like the Pareto principle is like 20% drives like 80% of business, like your super users or whatever. They call it like power users with all the AI stuff now. uh, those AI reports, kind of affecting some of the language. But yeah, this concept is not new, and Taco Bell has always talked about like their loyalty and engagement and stuff like that. And similar. I haven't had Taco Bell in a long, long time. I think they're great, amazing, beautiful case studies in menu engineering and all that great stuff. I just haven't eaten it in a while, and but I always do. This is how much of a nerd I am. I always keep up. I watch for their spectacles, their menu announcements, them talking about like the Taco Bell cafes, which I still want to go to. I don't know if there's one in Chicago. I thought I heard that there was one in this market or one coming to this market. But they always do this kind of like yearly roadmap and almost like I don't know, like a convention where they've have the videos and the stage and the audience and everything. I always wait to every year to hear about like what they have in the works and like what they're doing. It's really fun for me. Yeah, boy, I am a nerd. Uh, all right, so now that I've kind of taken a minute to you know appreciate the gravity of how probably weird that sounds that I wait for the Taco Bell yearly roadmap. I want to talk about something like really fun and interesting as a case study. As I said, I really like multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary solutions to things, and you know, having a little bit of a background in wine, being a member of the Guild Som, having my WSET certification. I love wine. I take it seriously. I'm in the group where alcohol is something I enjoy, and its flavors and history and culture is a very big part of my life. If my doctor is listening to this, but I only have 1 to 2 drinks every day or other day. uh, One of the case studies that I really want to talk about that's interesting and always throws people for a loop, and you've probably seen thrown around on social media, is color as taste. Now, as far as this goes, if you're a restaurant operator, you might be thinking to yourself immediately, like, I don't want to hear about this. Like, I'm not into wine. I don't have a big wine program. Whatever. This is, I would say the easiest way to relate this to you is um, a very long and understood principle that guests and everyone like consume with their eyes first. You eat with your eyes, right? The look of a plate influences a lot. So much so that this one particular study, but it's kind of this thing that I think has been repeated. But even on the face of it is a pretty damning condemnation. So color as taste essentially took a bunch of enology students. I don't know if it was at UC Davis or wherever. And there's some criticism on that too because they call them wine experts, I think, in the study, or like wine intermediaries, not intermediaries, like they call them wine experts or something like that in the study. So that is to say, like, they are familiar with wine and more familiar than the average person, probably being like winemaking, students. Uh, that frequently gets criticism because they're like, well, there's no way a master som would fall for this, and whatever. So what did they air quote fall for? What they did was they dyed white wine red with a tasteless, odorless dye. I mean, odorless implies tasteless, right? And they did like the same. I don't know what it was, but they were able to like dye red wine like clear. And I think even controlled some of the lighting and some things like that. So that way these things really looked like when you sat down, you're like, okay, well, that's a red wine, that's a white wine. And it was like the same thing. It was like the same Sauv Blanc. It was the same whatever Gamay or something that they used. And they had them taste these wines and then rate them. And then I think they even did another thing too where they dropped some like colors of red into the red and then made sure that the white wines looked like really, really clear and whatever. And the color was the primary indicator of the taster's flavor perception. So the white wine that they dyed very dark red was like they rated it with like flavors and aroma and profile like a heavy cab or something or whatever, right? Like, deep, rich fruits and leather and all this stuff. And then inverse for the white wine, right? Like floral aromatic, like lighter in acidity and all this stuff. And this is like this weird like thing where people go, oh yeah, all wine professionals are full of shit because they can be fooled. And I think that's kind of foolish on the face of it. Like everyone can be fooled. That's not the point. I even as a wine professional can tell you, yeah, we're full of shit. But yeah, that's like an asterisk too, right? Like how full of shit are we is different because, like I said, everyone can be tricked. Uh, the whole point of this is that the color of the wine immediately hijacks your brain. It's the very first step in the tasting rubric. Observation of the wine, tilt it, look at the intensity of color, look at the rim to check for oxidation. The very first thing you do is you look at the wine, unless you're a blind sommelier or something, I guess. Uh, and that's essentially what I think is the most important thing about this is that this visual indicator hijacks your brain in a way that you could very well smell, indicators and aromas of a white wine from the glass and not understand it, not interpret it correctly because the visual indicator, the first look, your brain says, oh, well, this is red wine. So I'm not smelling this. I'm smelling this. It completely alters your perception. And it's a really neat like party trick. I think people say like, oh, this is like egg on the face of the profession, and then like we talked about, people say like, oh, they're not real wine professionals, they're just enology students and whatever. I don't really, not interested in quibbling about that. I think it's just more interesting to me how you know color as taste really highlights how suggestible you are in terms of perception and you know uh, like I said, anyone can be fooled, even people with really well defined palates. This is not, we're not machines. Like, yeah, I think color as taste proves essentially the classic conventional wisdom, like you eat with your eyes, and how much impact visuals have on perception and experience and flavor. I think also I think it's a very very real case study in essentially like I think it's a very like real case study in bias. If you're looking at blaming consumer habits instead of catering to them, which is the core of hospitality, to an extent, right? Obviously, like legally and morally and professionally. But yeah, when you're when you're looking to like point at these things like, oh, this is why my business is failing, or this is why I'm losing money, it's like, no, that's the cause of it, but you're losing money because you're not meeting the demands. Yeah, so I just think it's a nice comparison. I think color as taste is a very powerful thing to review for the drinks and wine professionals and everybody. I think it's a very important thing. Uh, so, case study vaguely over. I think we're going to get into the roadmap here. So, I have a bunch of things that I'm way behind on. I think everyone can appreciate that. With some technical documents and some partnerships that we're going to be launching, through my website and through just my general consulting. But I do have two scripts in the works that I am going to shoot this week and early next week. And the first one is my video on AI in the restaurant industry. I do have my self-published book, which is in dire need of a second edition. It's kind of the nature of the field, and I wrote things in a kind of a foolish way for that were a little bit tied to the general capabilities and the potential capabilities. It was a very strategic kind of based thing, but I think after seeing the technology in practice, a few of those recommendations and ideas need to be tweaked. But I definitely have a great video essay talking about AI in the restaurant industry and how it applies, especially at the small to medium business category, which is where we're seeing a lot of confusion and misuse. And beyond that, I have another one on probably one of my favorite things in the world and one of the least utilized tools for businesses, especially once again in the SMB category, which is competitive analysis. And I'm super excited to do both of these. The first one with the AI thing is going to be probably a little bit more cynical, but I hope it's things that people are open to hearing and hear what they need to from it before they start making a handful of, I think, blunders, business blunders that are going to be very prevalent and only growing more prevalent going forward. And so now with a leaf blower in the background, I am going to wrap this episode up. Thank you for stopping by, and keep an eye out for the future video essays, and I'll be posting probably some shorts on some technical documents coming out in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, thanks.